Good morning. This is an IMC webinar. It's part of the IMC Professional Development Series, and we would encourage participants to give their feedback as to the efficacy of these events and any additional program that you'd like to see covered or indeed offer to cover. My name's Graham Williamson. I've been in the IMC for about 22 years now, and I've seen it grow from a relatively small group through a very big group, and at the moment we're looking to rebuild our membership. So if you've got some comments as far as topics that we could cover in these webinars, that would be most appreciative. Okay, we're going to be discussing today the topic of blockchain technology. Blockchain is something I'm sure we've all heard about, but the focus today is going to be on the hype that surrounds blockchain at the moment and some of the myths. We're going to look at how we dispel some of those myths. The focus is going to be on how we help our clients through what is in effect a digital transformation. A couple of rules, so guidelines for the webinar. As a participant, unfortunately, we can't have everybody online, so you are muted, but there will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. And indeed, I would very much encourage you to put comments into your control screen. So in the webinar control screen at the bottom, you'll have a chat place, a location for chat. If you just to click on that, you can enter in any chat that you have and any message that you want to send. And indeed, if something goes wrong during the webinar, do put in a comment in the chat bar there. This webinar is being recorded and will be available via the website after that. So later on in the week, it'll be up on the webinar for your future reference, should you wish. So what we're going to be talking about is blockchain. So let me just change the slide here. We're going to be talking about defining it. What is it? We're going to be looking at the power of the blockchain technology. Let's face it, most of us immediately think of Bitcoin when we're talking about blockchain. Well, it goes a lot further than that. The technology can be used in lots of different areas. And that's the trick. That's what we as consultants need to help our clients realize, is what is the application for this technology and how can I go about using it. Then we'll look at some of the myths, as I mentioned, around blockchain, because I hear even experts in the industry saying some wrong things when it comes to blockchain and spreading a bit of a misunderstanding of what it's all about. So we'll spend one slide on that. Then we're going to look at what it's good for, and this comes back to what you can go back to your clients with and recommend that they analyze in terms of what does it mean for their business. Let's face it, the technology is galloping ahead in leaps and bounds, and we're in a situation where the rate of change actually exceeds our ability to understand and exploit it. So digital transformation means basically two things. One, opportunity for those that can take advantage of it. So digital technology now is at the point where there's certain industries, certain companies in certain industries are going to do very well, and they're going to raise to new levels of prosperity because they grab onto this technology and move ahead with it. And unfortunately, there's going to be some that get left behind. They don't make the change, they don't realize the capability of digital technology, and that will be quite damaging for their business. As consultants, we've got to help them avoid that happening. I want to liken the development of blockchain technology to the development of the internet. So for those of you who were around in the 70s, you would remember the mainframe era. In the mainframe era, companies had these large computers that were they supported multiple terminal servers. So you had a terminal server connected in a hub and spoke environment to a central processing system that did the actual compute function. Okay. Then along came the Department of Defense in the US and said, look, what we want to do is come up with a computer environment that's resilient to events. We want to make sure that it's robust and will survive attacks. And that actually was the genesis then of the work around the internet. And now we have multiple endpoints, PCs typically, connected via a network to multiple servers in an environment that gives us access to unprecedented information, unprecedented computing power, and unprecedented capabilities of managing our businesses. Let's face it, nobody could run a business today without access to the internet. And for the millennials in the audience, fully understand how you're wedded to the internet, and should you lose it, that's quite a dramatic event in your life. It's hard to imagine. Some people don't realize that there was a time when we didn't have it. We're so fully dependent upon it, but we made this transition from a centralized environment to a distributed environment. And a similar situation can be observed in the financial technology space. So right now, our banks all manage very large computing services that look after the amount of money we have in our account, the transactions that are putting money in and out of it. That's all done centrally by the big banks. And we can connect, and so can bank staff connect to the system and get various bits of information. But it's mostly a sort of a hub and a spoke, a central, single, trusted environment that characterizes the banking industry. What blockchain is doing is saying, look, the environment's changing. We're moving from a central single ledger type of environment to a distributed environment where the information is spread over different systems, typically geographically dispersed, available from anywhere at any time. So we're no longer dependent upon a single repository of information, a single trust point. We now have multiple trust. Well, actually, the trust now is put into the blockchain itself. So the trust framework moves from a single trusted environment that we have with our bank to a diverse distributed trust environment where we actually trust the blockchain. That's where the trust is put into the environment in which we're working. So it's not just a technological switch. We're going to be talking more of that in a minute, but it's also a switch in the trust framework associated with our business process. Okay, just to talk about then a little bit more about what it is. Basically, what the blockchain does, it keeps a sequential record of events. So as things happen in our business process, we can record those events on the blockchain with the blockchain technology. Okay, so it's chronological and it's append only. Okay, now I'm not a very good accountant, and when I'm looking after the books in my business, I often have to go back and change something, like I've mistyped something, I'm terrible at transposing numbers, and then I've got to go back when I find the error and correct it. Can't do that with a blockchain. Once it's written to the blockchain, it's there forever, and there's some interesting issues that come out of that. But if you need to make a change, you've got to do an adjusting entry. Now, a lot of you accountants in the audience would say, well, that's how it should be done. Well, okay, that's how it happens on the blockchain. Once something has been written to this chronological, append-only sequential record of events, it's done, okay, and it's there forever. Blocks, they're depending upon what the blockchain is being used for, they're a collection of transactions that indicate an event. So an event might have a single transaction, event that might have multiple transactions, and a block would record those. And they are only valid if they adhere to the consensus rules that have been built up for that blockchain environment. Let me say it a different way. When you join a blockchain, when you start using a blockchain, you are duty-bound to say, I adhere to the rules associated with that blockchain. So the rules come with the blockchain, not with the business process anymore. You say, I explicitly trust this environment to look after this financial transaction. And what the environment says is the absolute truth. You can't go back at the end and say, well, no, that's not what happened. Once it's been recorded in the blockchain, that's what happened. It's decentralized. Okay, so there's no central authority looking over this, and this obviously is a problem for the banks. And what the banks have tended to do is saying, okay, well, we're going to use blockchain, that's fine, but we're going to control that. And we're going to be the central authority about what happens on that. So the R3 environment, for instance, is run by the banks, and they become the authority. Now, there's multiple banks in there, obviously, and they become the authority on the blockchain because they own it. But in a pure environment, a blockchain says, this is the environment that you're using, and you better adhere to the rules of this decentralized approach. Decentralization is very important because it's bringing into line things that we couldn't do before. So if you look at third world countries where there is no central bank, there is no infrastructure that we can rely on, blockchain has a lot to offer them because it can say, okay, well, I've got this decentralized approach to things, and I'll process your transaction right here because there is no central authority that needs to set up any infrastructure here. So we're seeing, particularly in African countries, a big surge in interest in terms of blockchain technology. So it's distributed. Okay, so it's basically the blockchain or the participants on it, a peer-to-peer a network of nodes, and there's no node that's in charge. All nodes have the same status. And basically, the node that completes the transaction first is the node that is the start of the process. And as the other nodes catch up and come up with the same result, then everybody agrees that that transaction actually did happen. But there's no one node that says, oh, I'm in charge here, and you other nodes have to take what I tell you, okay, because they're all doing the work themselves. It's tamper resistant, okay? It's not perfect, it's just resistant. Okay, very difficult to compromise a blockchain environment. It's would be so difficult as to be nigh impossible because you need to be able to compromise sufficient nodes to actually influence the outcome. So that would be, virtually impossible. So it's very tamper resistant, and that again is one of the nice characteristics of the blockchain. Okay, so as we said, it's not constrained by any sort of batch processes. We don't have to wait until tomorrow for the bank to tell us how much money's in our account. Okay? The network latency is reduced because if I'm in Africa, I can still get a node to do that transaction. It doesn't have to wait for something to happen back in North America or in Australia or something like that. It can handle different types of participants. No longer do we all have to adhere to a certain way of working, a certain demographic. It can accommodate wide disparity of participants. It's based on a trust in the technology, so not a third party. There's no third party that's sort of in charge. It's resilient and robust, and it is an enabling technology for business. And this is what we want to focus on this morning, is how we can use this environment to help us in our business situation. And there's also a social aspect of it that we shall come to as well. The blockchain is enabling things to happen on a community level, and that gives us some capabilities of doing things that we've not been able to do before. Okay, so I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, what it's not. Okay, one situation I hear a lot is, oh well, I can store this on the blockchain and that'll give me access to that data whenever I want it. Well, it's not a distributed database. You don't record data in a blockchain. You record transactions. Now that transaction might point to some data, but it's not storing the data itself. So let's take, for instance, one area that blockchain is becoming quite popular for is in the area of contracts. So if you're putting in place contracts, if you're in the legal industry and you want to manage contracts, blockchain has quite a lot to offer you because it'll record the events that happen within a contract. It won't record the contract. You will need some other data storage capability to that the event can point to say, well, this is the contract. The event that recorded the various steps in putting that contract in place can be on the blockchain, but not the data itself. So it's not a distributed database. Now, it's not an online transaction processing system. So if you're familiar with the banking environment, they've got this large OLTP systems that can do thousands of transactions per second. Okay, and they need that in order to have this central ledger facility that must do lots of computations in order to manage the transactions that are impacting that ledger. Not so on the blockchain. On the blockchain, a node will take some time to actually record a transaction because there's so much computing to do to record that into the blockchain. And so typically a node can handle 5, 6, 7 transactions per second. It's not an online transaction processing system that we're familiar with in the banking environment. Okay, it's not fast. Okay, so there's a time lag between the blockchain actually recording an event and you being able to access it to say, has this happened? So it's not the sort of thing that you can that is happening in milliseconds. Okay, it's happening in minutes. I've also heard people say, well, it's impossible to compromise. Well, okay, I'd like to add in theoretically impossible to compromise. It's a probabilistic theoretical algorithm that looks after what the nodes do, and it could be theoretically open to collusion, but as I mentioned before, it does rely on an extremely difficult situation if you did want to compromise it, because the compute power required to actually record a transaction and the fact that it's happening in multiple nodes, you would have to influence multiple nodes in order to compromise that transaction. We can say it's virtually impossible to compromise, but it is theoretically possible to compromise. Okay, another very important point here is to realize that blockchain is only part of an environment. Okay, blockchain on its own is useless. Blockchain supports business processes. So we have to start with what's the business process that we want to actually take a look at. And we're going to, as an example, we're going to look at in a minute renting a lawnmower. Okay, so we have to have a business process that we're using for this, within this environment. We then have to have some contract rules. So blockchain itself doesn't determine the rules. We, as users of the blockchain, must determine what those rules are. So there's the DAO. You might have read about that, where was actually an interesting situation happened at the end of last year, where a DAO environment was actually compromised because somebody read the rules and saw a hole and then took advantage of that to steal. I think it was something in the order of $60 million from the DAO. So the problem was that the rules are inherently what we're on about. So if we've used the environment, we've accepted the rules, everybody has accepted the rules. If one person's able to then take advantage of those rules to basically take money themselves, we must all say, well, that's all right, because the rules allowed it. Okay. So, but you will have to you need to have some contract rules around the blockchain environment, and you need to know what those rules are if you're going to use the blockchain. Then we need the blockchain technologies. As an example for that is Ethereum, open source blockchain environment that you can use. And then you need some sort of data storage. As we mentioned with the contracts, we need somewhere to store the information that we're going to be referring to. And there's the IPDB stands for Interplanetary Database, which is a new buzzword for a widely dispersed data storage capability. So if you're going to participate in an environment, it will have a business process, it will have some contract rules, it'll have the blockchain technology, and it'll have some sort of data storage. So you have to realize that we need all of those components in order to make something work for us. Now, so let's look at this application. It's a silly application, but it gives you the idea of what the blockchain can do and how it can be used. Okay. It also suggests that we are going to be moving into an environment where there's a lot more local activities or community activities that are going to start occurring as these communities get au fait with using the blockchain technology. So in this circumstance, we're talking about renting our lawnmower. Now, obviously, we all have a situation where we live in a house with a lawn, well, but those of us who do have a house and a lawn to look after will have a lawnmower. Our neighbor next door has a lawnmower. The neighbor on the other side has a lawnmower. The one across the street has a lawnmower. And at the most, we use them maybe in fortnight in the summer, every month in the winter. And so it actually represents quite a high impost on the community in terms of managing and maintaining all these lawnmowers. So what if you could allow your neighbor to access your lawnmower and agree to a period of time they're going to use it, agree to a cost that's associated with that? So in this circumstance, you could use the blockchain as you could start up a blockchain, and we'll look at a couple of sites that you could go to actually to do this. You could start the blockchain and put up a website that allows your neighbor to number one, reserve a time that they want to use your lawnmower, and number two, pay you a deposit for that. Now, most blockchains use the Bitcoin technology, so you will need to have a Bitcoin account in order to do this, but I would suggest within the next 5 years most of us will. And so you go in, you put in the time that you want to rent it, and you pay a deposit. That deposit must of course cover for damage or for stealing of the lawnmower, but they would do that. That's the first step. Second step then is, at the prescribed time of the rental, your neighbor would then have a code that would allow them to unlock the shed. Okay, so they can get into the shed to get access to the lawnmower. They then remove it and cut their grass, and hopefully they've rented it for long enough to allow them to do all of their grass. But they then return the lawnmower to the shed and they lock it. Okay, now your system would then see that the shed has been locked, and then what it would do is record the transaction on the blockchain. It would take the rental amount from the deposit and would return that information, that amount of money, to your neighbor's Bitcoin account. So all that would happen while you're doing something else. So the blockchain is enabling this business process to happen. It's looking after the locking and unlocking of the shed. It's looking after the allocation of the funds to your account, all while you do something else. So as I said, it's a bit of a silly example, but it gives you an indication of the sorts of things that the blockchain could be used for. Some of the examples that you might want to look up and do a bit of research on. Lazus, it's a platform for ride sharing. So right now, you and your community could use Lazus for a ride, it's a ride share, like an Uber type thing, an Uber type environment where you could set up a ride sharing system with your neighbors. Okay, and you can do that right online with Lazus today. Okay, and it's open source environment. OpenBazaar, it's a decentralized peer-to-peer commerce system that is growing in popularity. Big benefit is, it's decentralized and it's all, again, open source. Twister, that's a microblogging application. It uses the IPFS or a version of IPFS. That's the interplanetary file system that we mentioned earlier. And it allows blogging to occur. So you might want to take a look at that. Storj, that's a cloud storage capability with end-to-end encryption. So it's ideal for any sharing of secure documents, for instance. You might want to take a look at Storj and see how that works. Very high encryption associated with that. So it's a highly secure document storage environment. Slockit, you might want to look at Slockit. It stands for, I think, Secure Lock .it. And this, for instance, is something you can look at the demo they do on their website, and you can see how that could be applied to the lawnmower rental. So you can control locks or any IoT device remotely, and you can then append to that some sort of business process, i.e. renting something via that activity. OneName, it's now been renamed Blockstack, and we're going to see a lot more of Blockstack because it's becoming the digital identity platform. Now, when it says Bitcoin there, that's a bit of a misnomer. It's really blockchain, because Bitcoin, as we know it, doesn't really depend upon a digital identity. Okay? In fact, in the Bitcoin environment, you don't know the identity of the other people using Bitcoin. You have an identifier as you join Bitcoin, but that identifier doesn't tie back to your identity. Well, that's not good enough for a lot of blockchain environments. So for instance, if I'm going to rent my lawnmower to my neighbor, I need to know that it really is my neighbor that's renting that lawnmower. So I would typically want some type of identity associated with that entry. And so what OneName's or Blockstack's doing is supporting a move into managing digital identities for blockchain usage, if that makes sense. Come back to that actually in a minute. Showcard, it's again an identity provider service, and it's set up to try and provide a ID, a verification service for blockchain users. Okay, I want to take a little bit of a branch. There was a very interesting article in the current Harvard Business Review. You can go in and get it through EBSCO, and they talk about how do we determine how quickly a particular technology is going to be adopted. And they suggest that there's two factors in the time to adoption of any new technology. One is complexity, and one is the degree of novelty. So if the new technology is not very novel, it's just an extension of something we're all happy with, there's probably some type of, we'll quickly be able to adopt that new technology because it's just another way of doing something that we already do. Okay? I'd suggest that blockchain is not that. Blockchain has a high degree of novelty, and we need to get our heads around the change that a blockchain environment actually offers us. Okay, so the degree of novelty is quite high. And in terms of complexity, if something's quite simple, again, it'll be easy to adopt, okay? Because it's not something that I've got to do a lot of work to do in order to use. Blockchain, though, I would suggest is quite complex because I do need to make sure that I've got a Bitcoin account. I do need to understand the rules around the blockchain environment. Like, it's not something that's very simple. And so the HBR would posit that in that case, we're not looking at a single-use environment. We're not looking at a localized environment that would come from if something's not complex but quite novel. It's not coming from a substitution environment where something is quite complex but easy to understand. It's coming from a situation where it's both complex and novel. And this is where we're truly in a transformation space. And transformation space, they suggest, takes time. And therefore they're saying, well, their quote here is it decades from reaching its full potential? Their qualified answer is yes. I disagree with that. Now, obviously, you've got to define full potential. I think that we, within 5 years, are going to see some pretty impressive deployments of blockchain, and we, particularly as management consultants, need to get our heads around that. So once you go off and read that HBR article, don't take it all with a pinch of salt. Okay, this is, I think, blockchain is going to be quite transformative and is happening quickly. Another interesting thing that happened back in January is commencement by the Australian Standards Association in the development of standards around this whole blockchain environment. Okay, so what ASA is seeking to do is, number one, have a common blockchain terminology, and I just say hooray, we desperately need that because there's different terms being used in different ways within the industry. So we need to have that. Then they said they're going to have one or more standards that are going to look at privacy regulation on the blockchain, security protocols being used on the blockchain, and identity attributes. I guess that's associated with the privacy regulation. I think that's a tall order. I think it's not going to be a simple or trivial task to do that because there's some significant issues about security protocols, for instance. The blockchain security is basically in the way it works, not in the protocols it uses. Yes, it does use encryption technology, and maybe that's where the ASA is going to specify certain protocols, but the overall security of the environment comes from how it's being used, not from any adherence to standards. In terms of privacy regulation, I don't think that's a big deal because there's not going to be a lot of information stored in the blockchain. The blockchain stores events, not data. So from my point of view, I don't think we're going to see blockchain per se keeping our name, address, bank details, so on and so forth. Blockchain technology will need access to that sort of information, but it won't be the blockchain itself, in my opinion, storing that information. They go on to say they are going to extend existing standards. So there's the ISO 38500 that talks about governance, and the ISO 31000, excuse me, that talks about risk management, how to do that. In fact, risk management is very applicable to blockchain technology. We shouldn't enter into the adoption of any blockchain information without doing a risk management exercise to ensure that we do indeed agree with the rules associated with that blockchain environment. They went on to take a look at areas in which government could use the blockchain, and of the ones that got more than 50% support with the respondents, The land transfers and property titles, that came up number one. So nearly 3/4 of people think that's a good idea, and there are several implementations of that happening as we speak. So I would posit that we're going to see our conveyancing people using blockchain to a large degree. And that, it makes sense, because in conveyancing of any property, there's steps that need to be gone through, there's events that need to be recorded, and that recording of the events must be bulletproof, and that's what, what blockchain provides for us. The personal information I take with a pinch of salt. I mean, I can see there that 2/3 of people think that's a good idea, but in terms of exactly how that would work, and specifically for the passport documentation, that's a centralized situation. It's not something that, in my opinion, is ideally suited to the blockchain. Management of health records, however, is different, and there is a circumstance where we could indeed make use of the blockchain. One of the chronic problems within the health medical environment is the fact that people's health records are spread over so many different areas. Okay, so we have our GP has our health record. We have, if we go to a clinic, they've got a part of our record. If we present at a hospital, they've got part of the record. And there is a need to bring this together. And I would see that the blockchain does have some applicability there. One issue that medicos are going to have to deal with is finally deciding who owns those health records, because that ownership of information is what's holding back some of the work that could be actually happening in the medical space. Vehicle registrations was also highlighted. Again, I can't see that as being a big issue, because again, that's centralized. You know, in Australia, each state does its own, and I can't see much benefit to having a disparate storage system. But there might be some interesting issues around the actually registering sales of vehicles, registering service records for vehicles, and that type of situation. So we might see some interesting things happening in that space. So those were, you can go in and read the survey, download it from the Standards Australia website, and it gives some interesting, thought-provoking, I should say, instances of how blockchain could be used. Okay, now I'm coming to the end here, and I'm not seeing any questions yet in the chat. So if you've got questions, please enter those into the chat area. This is an infographic from Kapinga Coal, a company I do some work with, and I think it is a suitable focus of what we've been talking about this morning. It looks at what's the journey to digital transformation, what are the components, what are the issues that we need to be aware of. 8 fundamentals they've come up with. One, the digital transformation that's happening, and we're not talking just blockchain now, we're talking digital transformation in general. And the major trends there are information of the Internet of Things. We're getting vast amounts of information now coming in from sensors, coming in. We can control things now through actuators. They're very, very cheap. So we're seeing a lot happening in that IoT space. Another one is in consumerization. We're all being affected by consumerization, and that's only going to grow over the next 5 years. So these digital transformation affects every organization. We can't say that, no, my clients are immune. You know, we need to start thinking about what this means. It's not only here that it's accelerating. As we mentioned before, changes in technology now outstrip our capability of understanding them and keeping up with them. Okay? So we need to develop mechanisms that allow us to monitor what's happening and take advantage of the opportunities that arise. Number 3, it's more than just IoT and consumerization. So we've been talking this morning about blockchain. So it's these sorts of technologies that we need to keep our eye on to say, is this something that's important for me? Is it something that's important for my clients? And you need to have some formal mechanism for doing that, something that happens periodically. We must go do such and such. We've got to spend some time, one day a month maybe, researching, taking a look at things and understanding how those there's something new, what the potential is for us. Fourth one, and this is an important one, so listen right now if you haven't been listening. Digital transformation does require, it's not an option, it does require organizational change. The biggest hindrance to adopting new technology is the organizational structure within a company. Okay. A case in point, most organizations now, large organizations, have moved away from having a CIO, a Chief Information Officer, because Chief Information Officers typically just looked after the computer department and what they were doing. Okay? And now they're adopting CDOs, Chief Development Officers, where the person's responsible for not just understanding what technology can do, they're responsible for understanding the business processes within the organization so that they can apply the technology to those business processes. Okay, so in many cases, your clients need to go through an organizational change to allow them to really exploit the capability of digital transformation. Number 5 is everything and everyone becomes connected. This is, again, another important one because many cases we rely on the fact that certain people can't talk to other people or would be very unlikely to talk to other people. Well, that's a bygone environment now. Everybody can talk to everyone, and you better, don't bet on somebody not finding out something. So transparency is going to increase, and that's a good thing. Number 6, in the past there's been this dichotomy between security and safety. So we have in the information technology space a focus on security. We need to protect that data, we need to make sure it's encrypted, we need to make sure nobody can get to it that shouldn't, and that sort of thing. In the industrial computer side of things, so if you've got a client with plant automation systems, they say safety is most important. We don't want anybody being able to get to that particular network that runs that plant automation system. And they've said, it's going to have to be safety's number 1, so therefore we won't allow it. Well, again, that's a bygone era. We've got all the technology of the yin-yang now to make sure that we do protect our plant automation system, if that's what it is, or our industrial computer system. If we isolate it, we're going to lose out some of the capabilities we have in adopting new technology in the information technology space. So it's not a dichotomy anymore. Number 7, when we look at this, it says security, but really let's make that digital transformation. Is it a risk? Yeah. Is it an opportunity? Yes. We need to, as consultants, help our clients understand where the risk is and where the opportunity is. Number 8, the identity, managing identities within an organization becomes the glue. When I say organization, it could be the community. If I'm putting in a blockchain environment for my particular community in which I work, I need to know who the people are, and so I'll have to have some focus on how do I allow this particular person to authenticate to the system. So identity becomes very important, and controlling access to what we're doing becomes important. If you'd like a copy of that infographic, send me a note, and I can send that to you. In conclusion then, are we ready for the blockchain? I would suggest that the missionary days are over. The blockchain is going mainstream, and there's nothing you or I can do about that. It's happening. So that means that we need to look at, well, what's the impact of that? And one will be on our corporate applications. We have unprecedented capabilities to improve service levels within the applications that our companies run. We've got wider reach, we've got better security, we've got more agile service delivery, all enabled by this distributed environment that the blockchain affords. Okay, so let's make sure that our clients understand that. If they want wider reach, if they want to extend into other areas, if they want to, as they do that, make sure that they're properly protected. If they want to improve their service delivery, in terms of, I mean, you can record events that are happening in a service delivery environment very quickly within the blockchain. You can analyze that very quickly. You can make decisions on what's happening. It can be very important for you. And I do perceive an increased interest in Australian organizations in providing better service. And I think that's great. Social applications. So we looked at this silly example of the renting our lawnmower, but it does give us the capability of understanding what sort of innovative applications can we come up with. There's got to be things that are going to be made, not got to be, there will be things that are going to be made more simple to do now with the blockchain, and we need to be across those applications. It is going to be more regionally branded. Like we're going to have, so for instance, if you're using the ride-sharing service there, it will probably be a regionally bounded service that you're going to be putting in place. So we could do something for our local community in terms of managing a local service if we wanted to. We're going to see more not-for-profit activities. So the blockchain is very transparent. It's open source. Our millennials love that. I use the term ethically pure there. They love things that they can get behind that give them the capability of doing things. So for instance, if you wanted to put in a ride-share capability for disabled people needing transport to medical centres, it's very easy to do now, and we're going to see those sorts of applications deployed. In terms of the disruption to the world economy, this is more in line with, it's going to enable some pretty impressive things in areas that are remote. So for instance, I mentioned countries in Africa adopting through their mobile phones abilities to do transactions and have them recorded. That's something that would be very difficult to have done 10 years ago, but now it can be done, and it's the lack of infrastructure no longer is impeding that happening. And we've seen some pretty impressive things that Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, is doing in terms of helping these third world countries develop infrastructure and then use it for the betterment of the community. Okay, I'll stop yakking for a minute, and you can put in any questions that you might have. I see one here about why does Bitcoin value vary? Okay. Well, I can give you a personal opinion here. I've not studied this closely, but the value of Bitcoin is associated with what the participants in Bitcoin perceive it to be. So it's just like, for instance, I was selling one of my motorcycles a couple of months back, and I thought it was worth more than people were willing to pay for it. So regardless of what I think, the value of that motorcycle was associated with what people perceive it to be. And so it is with Bitcoin. People will buy Bitcoin at rates they consider to be acceptable, and they'll sell them when it gets high. So it's a standard sort of approach there. Now, having said that, we have seen in the past some manipulation of the Bitcoin value. I don't think that can happen anymore. There are so many people now using Bitcoin that those fluctuations that we've seen in the past, we're not going to, obviously it's going to fluctuate just as any currency fluctuates, but I don't think we're going to see the wide variation that we've had in the past. Okay, it's another one. Who can put a node on a network? Okay, so I'm assuming that's a blockchain. On a blockchain, who can establish a node? Well, theoretically, anybody can establish a node on a blockchain. But keep in mind that that node, that system, has to be able to do some very impressive computational capabilities. It's going to have to, it'll be a big, significant system. So not cheap, by the way, that's what I'm trying to say. It also needs to adhere to all of the rules established for that blockchain. So it's not something that you can do on your own. It's got to be a validated node that does that sort of work. And in actual fact, we're seeing a rationalization of nodes rather than a proliferation of nodes at the moment in some blockchain environments. I hope that reverses because the whole blockchain environment is based on having multiple nodes doing this work. And each node, for instance, by the way, not each node. The node that actually completes a transaction, it's the one that gets a payment for it. So there's a financial investment here, financial payback for the investment that companies are looking for, or organizations or people that are establishing these nodes. Can we help? How can we help our clients through digital transformation? Okay. Well, I think personally, I would think that what we should be doing is establishing a process with our clients. And in fact, if you think about it, this is something that's going to actually be very useful for consultants. I think that, well, I at least am guilty of not contacting my clients enough. I seem to want to wait until I've got a reason to contact them. Well, here's a reason. If you want to contact them and say, look, let's run a little workshop about digital transformation in your industry, let's talk through how it could be used. That could be a very useful service for your clients. So that when you say help through digital transformation is here to stay. It's something that we're all going to have to learn to live with. So we can't ever say we're done. Okay, all we can do is periodically meet with our clients and come up with, help them come up with, and I should say we don't have to do it. This is the nice thing about being a consultant. You just have to facilitate the environment where they come up with the solutions. I often say one of the things I actually teach at a university is project management. And one of the questions that always comes up is, well, how can you actually do risk management? Because you as a project manager might not know how to, what the risks are. Well, you've got a project team, and if you're a project manager, all you've got to do is stand in front of the whiteboard and ask the team what can go wrong, and they'll tell you. So it is with digital transformation. If you get them in a room, the people that should be in the room, obviously you've got to select the participants, but if you just ask them, okay, what does digital transformation mean to you? Or, got some seed questions about, have you thought about blockchain technology? Or have you thought about what's happening in the consumerization sphere? They will tell you. And you as a consultant can dutifully write that down and do the report back to management. So in actual fact, helping our clients with digital transformation is something that's possibly going to be very good for us as consultants. Okay, I don't see any more questions there. So if there's no more questions, we shall call it a conclusion of the webinar at this point. As I said, the recording will be put up on the website if you want to go back and refer to anything. If you have any comments or additional questions, please give me a bell, contact me, and I can get back to you. Thank you.